This is Beyond the Bench with Nick Morgasen and Nick Fodera. A look at sports and pop culture from beyond common sense. The show that constantly goes off the rails and might never get back on. When you don't belong, you're a bench warmer. On this show, there's no riding the bench. This is Beyond the Bench on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Welcome, everybody, back to the first episode of Beyond the Bench for the year 2022. That's Nick Fodera. I'm Nick Morgasen. We survived the holiday.
Yes, we did, even though everything just seemed to go from kind of okay to utter shit in the span of a couple of weeks. So we hope you had a good holiday season. But now we're back and we're here to gab.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting holiday. I'll leave it at that. But before we get to everything, make sure you follow the show on social media. Twitter at Beyond the Bench 1, Facebook.com/Beyond the Bench 1, and follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network. You can Nick,
follow our Twitter accounts at Nick Writes Words. That's me, and Morgasen Radio. That's him. So.
Right. We have a lot to get to. We have a great long interview, which you'll hear in a little bit. But Nick, how was your holiday, or what was left of the holiday?
Well, we made the best of it. You know, plans had to be canceled as last minute as you can get, but we made the best of it. We had some fun and we ate a lot, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah, I think I ate way more than I expected to during this holiday. I mean, we were planning to have family over for Christmas dinner because obviously last year COVID not able to.
And now this year again. But you know what? To make up for it, I'm 80% sugar now. So, you know, that's most of my diet involved a candy of some kind, which, you know, you got to get all the 4 major food groups in there.
You sure it wasn't a cookies and cream candy cane?
I've been trying to look for them ever since you said so. Ever since you said, and I can't find them. So you weren't lying to me.
I really wasn't. I saw it.
Making that up.
No, I wasn't making that up. Usually, and I could be a real BS artist sometimes, and I'm not making that up.
Okay. All right. Excuse the excursion a little bit. I need to conduct another search. I need to see if this is real.
Are you actually looking this up?
Yes.
Oh my God. I wasn't prepared for this. Oh man.
See? I see Oreo candy canes, but I don't see...
What's the same thing?
Yeah, Oreo flavored candy canes.
Same thing.
Not exactly. But cookies and cream Hershey's bar is not exactly this. Is not the same as an Oreo.
Have you ever had the cookies and cream Hershey bar before?
Yes, not for years, but I know what it tastes like, and it does not taste like Oreos.
I like it though.
If it did, they would put Oreo on the packaging. There's Oreo candy canes, which I don't realize which is kind of screwy because the texture is kind of off-putting.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do that really, but.
But still, enough about candy canes.
Yeah, I like candy canes. Well, I used to hate candy canes because I didn't know how to eat them as a kid. But now, well, I haven't had candy canes in years. But our Christmas kind of got ruined, unfortunately. Not to anybody's fault. We just had COVID positives in the family, unfortunately. And that kind of stopped us because we prepared like the big, large Christmas dinner. Like we did everything. And actually, if you want to check out what parts of Christmas dinner we were going to have, my father, who does Living Life, Sweet Treats and Eats, yes, shameless promo right there, and go check out the Christmas episode on our Empty the Bench Podcast Network YouTube page. He basically did all the parts of the Christmas dinner that we were going to eat.
So please don't tell me it went to waste.
Oh, no, we ate almost everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. 300 pounds later. No, I'm not 300 pounds. That was a joke. But yes, we pretty much ate everything. And we made vanilla cookies and we made Oh, there was so much dessert. Like, it was coming out of our eyeballs at that point.
Yep. I now know that there's more than one flavor of truffle.
There is?
Yep.
Shows you how much I know.
But still, we hope you had a good holiday, and now we're back to the business of talking about random bullshit.
Well, speaking of random bullshit, I guess since this seems to be the story, and I think you know where I'm going here. COVID-19 back in the news. Dr. Fauci, who's been very busy over the Christmas and New Year's break. Now, we're not surprised. We heard that the numbers were going to be up because people were dumb enough to get together during Christmas and New Year's and not get vaccinated or not deal with something.
Not test or it again. I said this before we did a break for the holidays, but you know what? Omicron is skyrocketing, and you know what? I'm willing to bet it spreads so easily that it's not just unvaccinated people that are driving this pandemic anymore or driving the spike in cases.
Breakout cases.
Is that contagious?
Breakout cases.
Yeah, breakthrough cases. But
yes, it's crazy.
The fact is that the messaging from the CDC has been consistently inconsistent at best and absolutely piss poor at worst.
But I don't understand something here. So originally, Fauci and the CDC just said, okay, we don't want to do 10 days anymore. That's taking forever. We're basically doing a 5+5 situation.
The reason why that is, well, ostensibly, it is to get people back to work quicker. But considering how much longer it can take to clear COVID symptoms, especially since you can still test positive after up to 90 days after you get exposed. This has the effect of making it seem like you're, feeding people into the capitalist meat grinder. And I hate to go all left wing on you, but it just seems like, you're prepping people. Okay, you had your 5 days. Now go die for the economy.
Well, that's the problem. That's what I don't understand. It's still technically 10 days because they're saying 5 days. And
but
then
that's where the confusing part comes in.
Well, wait a minute. Let me say something here, which is basically they said, okay, 5 days isolation. If you're asymptomatic, okay, you walk around with a mask for 5 days. Or if you're positive, then you still have to wear a mask. It's the same thing. It's 10 days.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, if you think people are going to, you're using the honor system to enforce that they will wear a mask after 5 days, you're dreaming. You might actually be asleep at this point because I can tell you from firsthand experience, people aren't really. You ask them to do something, and it's like, you can't tell me what to do. It's human nature to do that. Well, it seems to be our nature.
The honor system is the biggest load of shit I've ever heard of in my life because
it won't do what you're. If there's anything this pandemic has shown, and I hate to be cynical, but you know what? It showed us that people really don't think of others.
Of course.
They really don't put the needs of others above their own.
We went to my parents and I. We went to All American. I told you this story, I think, the other day, which is a burger place, and it on the doors, it says vaccinated, no mask, unvaccinated, mask. That's the honor system, folks. How many people you think are walking in lying, saying that they're vaccinated?
It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to tell that. Well, it's pretty easy to tell if they're lying, because what's stopping them from lying? What's stopping them from unless you're actually making them pull the card out, and unless you know how to spot a fake.
Go ask Antonio Brown.
Unless you know exactly what you're looking for, because these cards are very specific, and you have to be trained to spot a fake. You need to know. It's pretty easy to pull a fast one.
Wait a minute, though. Don't you almost need a coding device to be able to tell a fake?
No, it's a very specific. Not to go too inside baseball here, but it's a certain way the card is structured
Oh, I thought it had to do with the numbers because I know something.
Yeah, it's certain information,
Right?
that it has to be laid out in a specific order, and it has to be the structure of the numbers have to be in a certain way.
I'm tired of this whole thing. Like Fauci and the CDC keep changing the rules every 2 weeks, and if you keep changing the rules every 2 weeks, then
Everybody's going to walk around confused, which is what they're doing right now.
And by the way, and I know the stupid fact checkers are going to try and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about when I make this next statement. We're 400,000 cases a day in the U.S. right now. That's a fact.
Past 1 million over the past 24 hours.
What I'm saying is,
not to be Captain Pedantic.
No, but fuck your fact checker. This is real. I looked this up. The news is saying it. We're 400,000 new cases a day in the U.S.
Every doctor is practically screaming it.
So I don't want to hear it. Wear a mask. Get vaccinated. I'm still a little worried about the booster, but I think I'm going to get it. And
you should get it. I got it, and I was fine.
I mean, you just feel shitty for one day, but I think feeling shitty for one day.
that was after me getting my second shot. I had some adverse effect. I didn't have a damn side effect after I got my booster.
Oh, that's good.
Other than the arm being sore a couple of days.
But and now they're talking about in France, reportedly, there's a new variant possibly coming. I heard it on the news. A new variant.
Oh, great. Well,
well, they haven't confirmed
all the time, don't they?
They haven't confirmed 100%. Obviously, it's brand new. But here's the thing. What people don't realize, there's going to be new variants of this forever.
Unless we can figure out a way to get more people vaccinated, and not just in this country, share the vaccine technology with countries that can't get it easily, and medicate and understand that wearing a mask is a public service.
And also,
just like you stopping at a red light, wearing a mask in public is going to become a common good.
And also, I need to say one thing, and you're going to think this is totally against my theory. You're going to be surprised with what I'm about to say. I'm glad that Marjorie Taylor Greene got thrown off of Twitter.
Look, at a certain point, the horse is out of the barn here. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, but I'm saying is, and people were arguing with me about this the other day about how social media rules work and how you broke the rules. You misled information on COVID. I don't care if you're on the left.
Yeah, or they say it's freedom of speech, or it's a violation of the First Amendment. First of all, the First Amendment doesn't actually work like that. Second of all, it's not freedom of speech because the Constitution doesn't actually cover anything a private entity does, right?
Right, and you know what? All the political hacks that comment on this part of the podcast and say, well, it's my freedom of speech to say what no, it's not. You can say what you want, but if you
can say what you want, but the other people have the freedom of speech to call you a jerk.
Right, but I'm
that's
saying
exactly what they're doing.
But people are, oh my God, Twitter threw her off. It's a freedom of speech violation. No, it's not.
They can do whatever they want.
You signed up for their platform.
If anything, they haven't done enough.
So
they certainly haven't. They gave her a platform in the first place.
And you know what's funny? They didn't get rid of her. It was her personal account, not a representative account. So her representative account is still up.
Yeah.
Which means, is she going to pull a Trump and try to do it on her other account? See, you didn't think I was going to say that, did you?
I didn't want to consider the possibility, but now that's all I can think of. So
no, but I'm saying you didn't think that I was going to call that stupid and ridiculous, did you?
No, I did, because it's fairly cut and dry about what this is.
I mean,
fairly cut and dry. I mean,
she's been more outspoken than any other politician I've seen on this whole issue.
Look, the woman's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Literally, is she Atlanta? I can't even remember.
Alabama.
Oh, Alabama? I don't know. But like, if I had my sound effect, because you said cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Oh, here we go. So This story frustrates me. Politicians don't know any better. And now we're in a situation where 400,000 new cases are happening. We got to be approaching close to, 900,000 deaths at this point?
Wouldn't be surprised me if we hit 1 million before March.
So it is what it is. And unfortunately, COVID is not going anywhere. And by the way, anyone who says the peak is going to be at the end of January is nuts.
Again, that's wishful thinking, but let's just hope it doesn't get as bad as it was.
Where do you think the peak's going to be?
Back 2 years ago.
Where do you think the peak is going to be?
I don't know.
If you had to take a guess, you have no idea. March?
February, March, maybe?
Yeah, because they ruled, Fauci, what's peaking in January?
First of all, you're using South Africa because cases have already peaked there, but South Africa is not us.
Well, I love how they're coming out and saying, it didn't start there. It just happened to be South.
It didn't start there. It was just discovered there.
Right, but people are saying, it has nothing to do with them.
It doesn't have anything to do with them. In fact, they think it might have come from Holland?
Yeah, I heard that too. The UK, Holland. And now they're talking, wait a minute. Now they're talking about in Canada, they've completely locked down. Completely.
This is what happens when you don't get vaccinated. Variants pop up, and this is what happens. And I'm not talking about people who are vulnerable, like I've been saying for almost 2 years at this point. It's not about people who can't get vaccinated. It's about people who won't, can and don't.
It's right. It's absolutely right. Get vaccinated. Try to social distance. This is everything we've been saying for 2 years.
Protecting the people who can't.
You know what's funny though, and I don't mean funny as in haha funny. I mean ironic that they're actually saying that even if you don't have it, you're more chance to pass it by not being masked.
Exactly. Yes.
And people are, I'm not wearing a mask, but I have freedom. Well, you're actually passing the virus because you're probably a carrier. So, all right, enough about the COVID-19 bullshit that's going on in our country. One more story, and then we're going to throw to an amazing interview I did with a comedian, which I'll tell you in a few minutes. So the reason I bring this story up, first of all, MLB Network cuts ties with Ken Rosenthal, reportedly over criticism of Rob Manfred. Now, you're probably wondering, why are we talking about a sports story on Beyond the Bench? Well, excuse me. We're not talking about it from a sports point of view. I brought it up to Nick because once being a journalist, you can understand all too well what the situation is, right?
I know so many journalists who taught me that absolutely were burned out by the exact same thing. You talk to them about corporate interests in journalism, they recoil as if you just pulled your dick out in front of them.
But so to get into this, MLB Network, as I said, officially cut ties with Ken Rosenthal. Now, let's make something very clear. Ken Rosenthal is going to be fine. He's working at The Athletic. He's working for Fox, doing games. He is not going broke by losing the job at MLB Network. So,
however, the principle of the thing, and we should mention what he said about Rob Manfred.
Oh my God,
was not technically wrong. We're paraphrasing here because we don't want to go too deep in it. But
I have it right here. I have the exact quotes right here. The harshest words came in a column published. Wait, what? June 16th. What? I didn't even read that line. The harshest words came in a column published June 16th at with the headline, Rosenthal, quote, Rosenthal, Manfred must strike a deal with the players or ruin his legacy.
So apparently that pissed old Rob off. And so not only is he thin-skinned, he also doesn't know what day it is.
Well, and it also says the reporter accuses the commissioner of, quote, performing a massive flip-flop and alludes to the perception he is, quote, beholden to the owners and out of touch with the players. Agreed!
Duh! There are very few people on Earth or in the in the baseball media that know more about baseball than Ken Rosenthal does. So if he says it, it's probably true.
There's very few guys and I would put them at the same level as Ken, a Tim Kirchin, a Buster Olney, a Joel Sherman, Those are the guys that I can really think of at this point.
And he's in contact with Rob Manfred frequently. They have to speak.
Jeff Passan actually also.
Jeff Passan too. So
these guys have the right to say what they want.
So, but yeah, and he's going to say, "Oh, it's libel." First of all, it's not untrue. It's not. He's not presenting it as a factual thing.
But name something that isn't true. Name something that's not true in the statement he said.
It didn't matter if it was true or not, because again, the way libel laws work, if he were to sue him, let's say.
He's not suing him. Come on.
If he were to do that, you would have to prove that Rosenthal knew it wasn't true and published it and said that anyway to screw over Rob Manfred.
But wait a minute. Libel.
What he's saying is he's giving his opinion.
Wait a minute. Libel is probably one of the hardest things to prove in all of legality, isn't it?
Yes.
You literally would, like you said, have to prove that he was doing it on purpose.
Yes, the way I was taught it in J school, and believe me, this is something we went over a lot. It's the burden of proof must fall under Rob Manfred in this hypothetical situation to prove that Ken Rosenthal knew it wasn't true and said it anyway and presented it as fact. But this is not fact. This is just him stating an opinion.
Right. And
so apparently there's a fundamental disagreement about what Ken Rosenthal is and what role he serves when he's working with MLB Network. Is he just a corporate mouthpiece, or is he actually a journalist?
Actually, he was a lot of times, like in the off season, he would be part of the hot stove shows, like an insider, like Passan would be.
Yes. They brought him in there specifically for his journalistic expertise.
Right. And he was a newsbreaker. He was a newsbreaker. So,
yeah, because they value his opinion. Because he opines all the time. He's asked what he thinks because he's been on the beat for more than 30 years.
Longer, probably, actually. And you know what? And unfortunately, I had a feeling this might happen because who owns part of MLB Network? MLB!
So, again, this is where the conflict lies. The conflict between journalism and corporate interests.
That's what I find funny, though, because
the two tend not to mix.
But wait a minute. All the professional networks, MLB Network, NBA TV, NFL Network, NHL Network, you work for the sport when you work for the networks. So if you're
saying that Ken should have known to hold his tongue?
No, I'm saying that. Are you really surprised that MLB Network got rid of him because he made a statement about Rob Manfred? He knew what he was doing.
But here's my challenge to you, Mr. Manfred. Prove him wrong.
I mean...
And you've done nothing of the sort.
And you know what the dumb part is? This all goes back to corporate ladder, because if you think about it, so Ken was partially wrong. Even though he is a journalist and he's been doing this, he's very experienced, he should have known when you burn the belly of the beast, which is MLB that owns MLB Network, he was going to lose his job for that.
But he bit the hand that he didn't realize was feeding him.
Again, you and I, let's make it clear. We agree with everything that Ken is saying.
He was not wrong.
It's just that Rob Manfred has a bruised ego and won't let it go.
Yes. It's exactly what Jesse told you.
Jesse Rogers from ESPN. Yeah.
What Jesse told you. I mean, they all know. The baseball writers all know what Rob Manfred is, and even more specifically, what he is not.
I mean,
so you're not breaking any new ground or breaking any taboos within the the baseball journalism community by saying that Rob Manfred is terrible at his job.
You know what probably did him in another article piece that he referred to in a quote, Bud Selig, baseball is a business, we all know it, but it is a business that former Commissioner Bud Selig describes as a social institution with social responsibilities, a business that holds an antitrust exemption, distinguishing it from every other professional sports league. I don't think that probably went over too well with Rob.
No, he does not like to be. He doesn't like the mirror held up. He's like a vampire. You'll hold the mirror up to him. It's like,
And then there was another article, quote, MLB's latest proposal to players comes with sharply worded letter marking ill will, and another one that said Rosenthal, a July 4th return is all but gone with baseball as far from a deal as ever. A league cheerleader, he was not. But the thing is, and we talked about this when Israel Wojnarowski got in trouble with ESPN when he put out that political, when he took that political shot.
Yeah,
I forgot who he took the political shot at. It was the guy from
Might have been
Missouri.
Trump.
No, it was the Missouri guy. He got in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Hawley, I think was his name.
Yeah, Josh Hawley.
And the email got exposed because Hawley exposed it. And but here's the thing. Woj is never going to get fired because Woj is the bread and butter that ESPN exists on.
They're not going to budge.
No,
but
but for baseball,
Ken. Yeah. The thing is, though, Ken is a lot more magnanimous about this than I think any of us would have been.
But what's interesting,
because if I was in his shoes, I'd be going scorched earth on him. It's like, see, I told you, but you know what? He took it in stride, which credit to him.
Could Ken sue?
Technically,
because he got fired for doing the job.
Yeah. Although, I mean, if there's a specific language in his contract, saying that he cannot piss these people off,
his contract was expired. First of all,
so they just chose not to renew it.
Which you hear that with athletes all the time when they do something stupid in their contract. Oh, we just chose not to bring them back.
They kind of covered their asses here.
But
there isn't really a lot in legal recourse he can take because they can always just blame. Oh, he cost too much money. That's why we didn't.
This Yahoo story, the last sentence explains it all. Rosenthal may have been the only one to do so on an MLB payroll. That makes perfect sense.
But it shouldn't be the case. But
I agree. MLB dropped the ball, no pun intended, on this situation. And now, first of all, Ken, like I said, Ken is going to be fine. He works for Fox Sports doing the games, and he works for The Athletic.
Kenny Boy's not starving.
I guarantee you he's probably doing better with Fox and The Athletic than he was doing.
And the fact that he actually called him out and said what he thought and didn't just try to put up a wall of silence to protect the integrity of the game. That's not his job.
Did you see the tweets he put out after he got let go?
Yep. That's why I say he's more magnanimous about it.
So I'll quickly, and then because we're a little over here, but I'll say, so Ken Rosenthal put out two tweets. Can confirm MLB Network has decided not to bring me back. I'm grateful for more than 12 years. 12 years I spent there. And my enduring friendships with on-air personalities, producers, and staff. I always strove to maintain my journalistic integrity, and my work reflects that. Nothing else is changing for me professionally. I am proud to remain part of great teams at The Athletic and Fox Sports. He said it, Nick. Like I said, journalistic integrity.
Again, he held on to his.
But I'm saying, even though he's not saying it, that's taking a shot at MLB Network.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know how they say you don't have to talk loudly to scream something?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? He was screaming something there without doing it loudly.
He was yodeling like the Ricola commercials.
I like those commercials. I miss those, actually. But I don't know. The reason I brought this up is because I know this would hit a soft spot with you big time.
It does.
You, and I don't know, when you were trying to do work with different outlets, when you were trying to write, did you ever have to deal with any corporate bullshit?
Oh, hell yeah. I got an angry letter from a CEO once.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Don't say the company, but about what?
It's about public transportation, believe it or not.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay. Really?
Oh, yeah. You're always going to rub people the wrong way. That's how you know you're doing the job right, especially if you're doing investigative journalism. And you know what my teacher told me? I'll never forget this. She said, don't change it. Don't change it. Don't do anything. That just means you did your job right. I saw your quotes. You're good.
As long as you stick to your guns, that's all what matters.
Yeah, they'll back. Like I said, Hofstra always back me up. Newport's always back me up if I got into trouble, and that's really all you could ask.
I'm not going to say names either, but one of my friends who's been in the business a very long time, writing, did a story on somebody, and she spoke to him. And after the story was put out, she tried to claim that the quotes were not real.
Which, if any journalist worth his salt records it.
No, he did. He did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the worst part is...
Which is what I did, too. So I know I was right.
And the establishment sent a threatening letter to my friend. But they never did anything.
Yeah.
It was a scare letter.
It's just a scare tactic.
But... I don't know, and we'll have to say this for another episode, but just why do people speak to reporters and then they try to say they never said anything? That I'll never get.
Because A, they either said something they later realized they weren't supposed to, or they're trying to protect, they realize what the journalist is actually going to write about, and then they don't like that very much.
It's just amazing to me. If you're going to accept an interview, you're going to accept an interview.
It taps into a distrust of the press, which is something that's become a lot more prevalent over the past 6-7 years.
By the way,
not coincidentally, when Trump took office.
Oh God, yes. But I was going to say the term "off the record," and I'll never understand this. What are the legalities when you're talking to somebody in an interview and they say, "Oh, well, this is off the record," or we're having a conversation. This belongs on the record. This doesn't.
Do not, if you're a journalist, do not go into any interview promising anything. Try to get as much of it on the record as you can.
But I'm saying,
it's about building trust.
But what if someone says, like, all of a sudden, like, you can't use this. This is off the record. But and then they continue to say, "Okay, now we're back on the record." How does that work?
You really shouldn't. But
no, I'm talking about the guest, the person you're interviewing.
Or if they'll say, "Oh, I'll tell you what I need to know, but what you need to know, but you keep it off the record, okay? Deal?"
Yeah. What do you do in that situation? You would know better than I would.
You try, like I said, you try your best to get as much on the record as you can. But depending on what the information is, and depending on whether you can independently verify what was given to you by 3 people or more than one person,
yeah,
then you can use it. But again, it varies from situation to situation. It's more of a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing.
But I'm saying is if you say something to a journalist, if you say off the record, that doesn't stop them from possibly putting it in a story.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you don't make that distinction anyway.
No, but I'm saying is, like, say you get a big name, I don't know, pick any celebrity you want, and they say they're talking to you, everything is on the record, and then all of a sudden they tell you something.
Yeah,
and
that's bullshit. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing was promised. You're just trying to head off any kind of bad publicity.
So can they sue you if they told you something was off the record? Like that they didn't want you putting in?
Nope.
Wow. Shows you how much I know. That's why I asked, because you're the journalist. You know this better than I do.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right.
And I've got the scars on my ass to prove it.
All right. So now, because we went on a diatribe a while, I think this was an interesting story. That's why I went longer with it. But so now we've had quite a few interviews over the last couple episodes, and comedians. So I did an interview with Bob Levy over the break, which was really good. He used to be on the Howard Stern show. That was very candid. He was very nice. He actually followed our shows on social media, actually. This week, we stay in the Stern Show realm, not because I purposely was looking for it. He just happened to come along. I contacted him. He said, "Yeah, sure. Let's have a conversation." Well, what I thought was going to be a 30 to 40-minute conversation became an hour, and a really fun hour, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, We talked about the show. We talked about how he's doing podcasting. We talked about he did all the Wack Packer voices from the Howard Stern show, which was really funny.
Yep.
He played around with echoes on his microphone. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It got to a place where, like, when you watch me during the interview, like I laughed for a whole hour. Like, that's hard. Ask Nick. I don't laugh for a full hour ever.
Yeah, usually I take it as a badge of honor when I try to crack him up.
So yes, like Shuli Egar is the name of the comedian. He goes by Shuli because he doesn't really go by his last name. Really funny. Basically, he left on his own regard. That's rare for that show in every way, shape, or form. So we're going to throw that interview now. You're going to enjoy it. It's really fun. Grab some popcorn if you can. Just don't go to a movie theater because that's probably not a good idea. And
take it away.
Take it away, and we'll come back and we'll finish after the interview's over. Joining me now on Beyond the Bench, this comedian is known for being on a radio show. We'll talk about that. Many years of doing that. He also does stand-up. He does podcasts. He does a lot of things. He keeps himself very busy, especially during this pandemic. Shuli Egar joins me now. Shuli, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So, as I ask everybody in their interviews, how has everything been during COVID so far?
Oh, fantastic. We left New York. We got a place out in Alabama. Beautiful home. Nice 2 acres of land. Just living life, man. Life goes on here. The people here are very kind and the manners everybody has, very, very nice, man. So I'm enjoying it. We're all enjoying it. It took some getting used to, but we've adapted, we've adjusted in the 1 year plus that we've been here, and it's good, man. I'm happy.
I mean, it also helps that I'm sure it was. I think I heard you say it's cheaper living down in Alabama than it is in New York, for sure.
It fucking better be. It's Alabama. I mean, who the hell are they to charge a steep price for anything? No, it's definitely, I got a 5-6 bedroom house with 2 acres, and I'm paying $300 more a month in my mortgage than I was rent for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment.
Wow.
In Queens. So yeah, it's much cheaper cost of living out here for sure.
Well, that's good, and we'll get into everything. But I'm just curious. So you've been doing podcasting. I saw you've been doing that a bunch now.
Yeah, once I left the Stern Show, I started my own podcast. It's called The Shuli Show. We're live a couple days a week. You can sign up to Patreon, and you get access to not only the live shows and to me, but you get access to all the bonus content, which is tons of stuff over the last 15 years that I've captured on my own while on assignments for the show. And I got another podcast coming out this month at some point with a comedian friend of mine, James Mattern. He's got an album just came out that's nominated for one of the best albums of 2020. It's called The Check Spot. And we started together in Vegas bombing on a nightly basis. So much that we had a code phrase that we used to use for each other. One of us was hosting. You go up there, you bomb. Now you're bringing up your buddy. And as we're shaking hands on stage and I'm passing the mic off to him, I would just look at him and I go, "Thanks for coming out." And that was his way of knowing you're about to eat a shit sandwich with this crowd. And so that's the podcast. It's called Thanks for Coming Out, a podcast about bombing. And it's James and myself interviewing our fellow comedians and sharing war stories and trying to find the best bomb story. And we've recorded a bunch of episodes already with a bunch of great comics, and it's a lot of fun. This is what we do when we all get together anyways, is we sit in the green room and trade war stories. So that's a great, fun podcast. The Shuli Show is available on all platforms, YouTube channel, and then the Patreon if you want to support,
So were you always in the podcast game? Was that a thought while you were on the Stern Show? Like, were you thinking of what's my next move while that was going on? How did that come to mind?
I mean, in New York, with all the comedian friends that I have, so many of them have podcasts. There's so many great YKWD with Robert Kelly, Legion of Skanks with Dave, Big J and Lewis. So many, just to name a few, Jessica Kierson. Everybody out there has a podcast. They're all hilarious stand-up comics. And I would go on from time to time, but it was a struggle for me working there because management, the suits, would always give me a hard time when I would go on these podcasts. And the podcast for me was twofold. One, it was to promote me as a comic. It was a way for me to get on the air somewhere that I couldn't over there because of all the structure and how everything's mapped out, and that's fine. And two, sorry, I had a phone call. And two, it's kind of like being an ambassador for the show too. It's like maybe somebody doesn't have Sirius, or a younger listener doesn't know Howard, and maybe they think I'm funny and they come over and and also it helps me with the future, as far as promoting gigs, and you're yelling out of different windows to try and sell tickets. So plus, where I was working, I wasn't allowed to plug anything on the air. So, it was a necessity. And as I watched it grow and get bigger, absolutely, it was something in my mind. Because look, at the end of the day, I left the show. I wasn't fired. I resigned. And 10 years ago, I do this move, and the only logical move is to get another job in radio. Whereas now we're in this time frame in the world where all you need is a Wi-Fi signal, some equipment, and you're a broadcaster. And I get it. It pisses off a lot of radio people, and I understand, but what are you going to do? At times they are changing, man. It's the same with the TV industry, the entertainment industry. You used to have the right manager or agent get you a meeting. Now you just got to have numbers. Now you just got to have a huge following on YouTube or Twitter or anything. That's it. That's how you get booked in comedy clubs these days too. There's tons of podcasts that sell out comedy clubs every weekend that nobody knows any of them by name, but they're huge. There's guys making, what I was making on the Stern Show on Patreon. So, the game has changed, and for me, it was a lot less worry as far as like, what am I going to do now? I knew people would come over and listen for the first episode because Howard doesn't like to talk about people who are no longer there, even though we left on good terms. So my goal was, how do we keep them for episode 2, 3, 4, and now I think we're on episode 80 or something. But it's been great, man. The support has been awesome from the start, and we're getting more and more sponsors, and the numbers are growing. We crushed it last month with downloads and guests, and we're doing it, man. We're doing it one step at a time. It's a, what do they say? It's a marathon, not a sprint. And we started off in a really good spot, a lot better than a lot of people starting a podcast for the first time. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's great. It's great to be able to think of something the night before and not have to ask anybody and just do it the next day or whatever.
Yeah, the podcast game is a very interesting space. I mean, especially since it's starting to become a little bit oversaturated, but if you find the right person,
a little bit, a little,
a lot,
you kidding me?
A lot. I should know coming out of the radio business, going into podcasting. So, yeah. So
my chiropractor in New York had a podcast where he would interview while he was adjusting you.
Wow. Yeah. That's a new one.
Yeah. And I was on a podcast in the Uber on the way over to the guy. The Uber driver had a podcast. So, I was double booked on a 10-minute ride.
Wow.
Yeah. So oversaturated is a good term to use, because it is. And that's the other thing. It's like, so what makes my podcast different from others, right? Like, how do you stand out in a sea of everybody is doing a podcast? For me, I fall back on my experience. I've learned from 3 of the greatest radio guys to ever live, in my opinion. Howard, Jay Thomas, Scott Ferrall. All 3 of those guys were 100% originals in what they did. and they did it their way. And I learned from each of those guys because I worked the most with those three guys up there at Sirius, and I learned from all of them. And so this show is like a tribute to that, like, hey man, this is what I learned from these greats, and I'm going to try my best to implement it into my show.
It's actually interesting. I'll go to that now. So you talked about the different shows you've been on with Jay Thomas, and were you with someone, Dr. Harry Fisch? I was reading
Sure.
that.
Yeah, we had a men's health show on Howard 101, which, it's crazy. That show was 1 hour long, right? And Sirius, they don't have a ratings book, right? But they have for talk shows, they have a call-in like chart, right? Where even the calls that don't get on hold get registered. So you have a number of that's kind of a rating system for them for interactive shows, is like, how many calls is the show? Obviously, Howard's number one. And then, I don't know what the rest of the list, but I can tell you that our show, the Dr. Harry Fisch show, with me and Dr. Harry Fisch, board certified urologist, professor of urology at NYU, like real deal. This guy should have never done anything with me, yet he got it. He got the humor and the fun in that show. And he was the one who explained it to me that when it comes to guys, they don't talk about medical issues unless it's hidden in some humor. And whereas in women, it's very black and white. Tell me what the fuck's going on type of thing. So our show, out of all the shows at Sirius that took calls, and so that includes sports shows, we were in I think fifth out of the top 10. I think we were in the fifth spot for a 1 hour show. These other shows were all 3 hours, 4 hours, definitely more than one. So that show was fantastic, and that was another way for me to learn how to kind of work without a net. All I would see is what their topic was, and then try to make something funny out of it while he tries to help people. I ruin it.
I'm just glad you did funny stuff, because when I worked in radio, a lot of those doctor shows were paid shit that you didn't want to listen to.
Well, that was the genius of Tim Sabian, is he had this friend in Dr. Harry Fisch, and he was just like, we got to team him up with the right person. And when he gave me that opportunity, I went in there guns a-blaze. Our first show, this guy called in and was like, what does it mean when I have yellow semen? and I screamed, it means you're a coward. And he laughed, where with his credentials, he should have turned around and said, get this fucking idiot out of the studio. I'm trying to do a doctor show. But like I said, he got it. Like, he knew this was something that could work if we did it this way.
Well, I guess that's how those channels were done. I mean, like, even though you brought in serious people, if they got the norm of how that brand of Stern worked, you came in, you didn't take it too seriously, or else you weren't in with the in crowd, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and he wasn't like a super fan or anything, so he didn't really know that world. He just got, he picked up on the fact that what we were doing was making for an entertaining show, and that hour would fly by. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to work with him. My favorite thing is the spontaneity of radio, right? That's what I grew up listening to with Howard, is just, something happens and now it's 45 minutes goofing on Jackie, or, something happens and, we send somebody down in the street, right? Like that organic, spontaneous part of comedy is maybe my favorite thing about comedy. And so that's, I definitely have a lot of that in my show.
And what about Jay Thomas? Because I know you were kind of doing that simultaneously, right? When you were on Stern, I think you were doing that at the end of the week, or
every Friday. Jay was on like one of the channels over there, the comedy. They changed names like 17 times, but he was on one of the channels during the week, and then on Friday they would let him have a morning show on 101, and so Jay and I met, a couple times up at Sirius. I went to interview him for a couple Howard 100 news stories. And then he was at Caroline's one night when I did a spot, and he came and talked to me afterwards, and he was like, hey man, my my ha-ha seat guy is leaving. So if you ever want to pop in and do radio and be funny, come on by. He's like, I'll give you $25 each time. And I was like, I'd do it for free. I was just starving for the airtime, you know? So I went, and, you know, the first day he was like, listen, he's like, I know you come from that world over there, that pro wrestling bullshit. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, is he doing a bit right now? Because that's the thing. Jay was one of the most underrated actors ever. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw him tweak people and then turn to me and wink. And I'd be like, fuck, this dude's a master. So he'd go, I know you come from that fucking wrestling world where it's all bullshit. I'm going to tell you right now, on my show, I don't want to hear you making a joke with the word cunt in it. Okay? And I go, yes, sir. And he says, I want you to come up with a joke that makes people think about the word cunt without you having to say it. And I looked at him and I go, I get you 100%, which I didn't. I didn't know what any of that meant other than don't say the word cunt. So, but I learned from this guy, man. We had a fun, like, good cop, bad cop thing where he would book these weird guests that were like, you know, a woman owns a pickle farm in Kentucky somewhere, and she marinates all her pickles in different flavored Kool-Aid. And that was a guest on his show. And the beauty of Jay was he would buy into whatever weird shit they were about 100%. He was the good cop. And I would be the bad cop. And I'd be like, are you married? Like, is somebody with you in life while you're doing all of this? You know? And he was just brilliant guy on so many levels, taught me so much. And was the guy who said, you know, for many years, you need to do your own thing. So another way I'm paying tribute, you know, to him is finally making the jump that I because you meet people in life, you know, for a reason, right? And so when this guy is dying of cancer, his last week of life, he says to me, I need you to set aside about 60 to 90 minutes, get a pad and pen. I got to talk to you. We knew he was sick. Everybody else didn't know. He didn't want it to affect his job at Sirius. He didn't want it to affect his health insurance, any of that stuff. So he didn't say anything. But we all knew, and we could hear. And he came to town less and less. And he sat down, and this was about 3-4 days before he passed, and basically gave me an outline of what I need to do in my life. And I just remember sitting there going, with what this fucking guy is facing, like, he gives a shit and has room in his brain right now with everything that he's dealing with to do this for me. Like, that's huge, man. That's something I can't just throw aside and pretend that I didn't hear it. You know, it always stuck with me. And I knew one day I would make that jump. So I'm glad I did.
So from one to another, how did you get involved with Pharrell? Because I find that very interesting in a lot of ways.
So Scott Ferrall comes over to Howard 101 early on in the Sirius years. And I had heard Scott, because I lived in Vegas for a while, so I would hear him late night on Vegas radio. But I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know anything of him. He comes to Sirius, and his board op at the time was this guy, Lou. He's called Sweet Lou. Sweet Lou on the board. And Lou was my roommate as well. So Lou tells me, he's like, because Lou's a big sports nut, so he knew Pharrell. And he's like, dude, this guy Pharrell, he's phenomenal. He's like, I've never seen anything like it. And I remember, because at that time, I was single and I was throwing every ounce of free time that I had into work. I never left Sirius. So while I was there in the morning, by the time Pharrell came on at 8, I was still there. I was trying to learn. I was trying to keep a spot, because nothing was guaranteed. I was there on a 1-week audition that lasted a year. you know. Um, and so I watched him, and I'll never forget. He was doing a Rolling Stones song. Well, at first he's giving up scores, and Lou's playing this music underneath him giving scores, and he's just like, "Turn that up, Lou, turn that up." And I'll never forget, he's singing, which Scott Ferrall's voice is not a singer's voice, and he's dancing like Mick Jagger in the studio. And this is radio. There's no camera element. There's nothing's being filmed. And I'm just watching. And he's like, "I'm a star fucker. That's what you are." You know, and he's doing, and he's pacing back and forth. And I'm watching this guy, and I'm going, how the fuck is this guy not on TV? What the hell, man? Unbelievable. The Howard Stern of sports radio. 100% an original. Nobody could ever do what Scott Ferrall does. And I love that man. He gave me so much airtime, taught me so much. His studio was an open door for me. And so, you know, like I say, you meet people in life for a reason.
Were you sad to see him go, or when he left?
Oh yeah. I you know, I like Mad Dog. He's a nice guy. I never had an issue with him, but to throw that kind of money and get behind somebody that you can hear on any other station, any other place in the country. Sorry. Scott Ferrall, there's nobody that sounds like that. There's nobody that does sports radio like him. He is a force, man. He is a personality. He's got that it factor. Yeah, if that's me, I put everything behind that fucking guy. I get behind. I put him on a pedestal. Him, Howard. You showcase your goods, man. Those are tits. Show them. You know what I mean? The fuck.
So now talking about doing some of your own things while being there. So Miserable Men comes in the picture.
Yeah.
And I told you before we started, I spoke to Bob Levy last week, and he was telling me about how you guys kind of met, how the chemistry started, and that show went from being a 1-hour show to eventually being a 4-hour show. And so where did that creative beast come from?
From myself, Levy, and Florentine. That was the original. Jim Florentine, Bob Levy, and myself was the original Miserable Men show. And then and we basically, you know, bullshitted our way into a show. I mean, we told Tim Sabian, who was the program director at the time, "Hey, we're ready for this test show you approved for Tuesday." And Tim's just running constantly. This is Tim Sabian. He's just going. He's just what are you doing, fucker? Like, that's him. You know, I'm like, "I'm working. Come on, you're going to lunch." You know, he's like a tornado. Whatever gets in his way gets picked up and taken with him. And so I'm like, "Hey, we're ready to do that test show Tuesday." And he goes, "Okay, sounds good. Tuesday night. Yep." And so we go on the air and we do Miserable Men, and it was 3 comics. And it's a no-brainer. We just sit there. We've always said that the Miserable Men show is like The View if it was hosted by cavemen, like just Neanderthal knuckle-dragging idiots. And, you know, at the end of the day, those of us who are still married are pussy-whipped and would be nothing without our wives. But this is a fun little escape for us. It's a little private booth we can go into and pretend we're alpha males and badasses and run shit in our house. But at the end of the day, we all know who's in charge. Pussy's in charge. So we're at its mercy like everybody else. And so then it evolved to myself, Bob Levy, Mike Morse, who's a stand-up comic, roast writer, used to write a lot of Lampanelli stuff for roasts. Great guy. And Mark Burns. Now, Mark Burns is kind of like the Shuli of Miserable Men. He used to call in at the end of every episode, and he would do a recap. And it was a really funny recap of the show. And we said, we should bring this fucking guy in one night and just have him sit in with us. And as soon as he sat in, he was, number one, honest, which made for great content. And he took a beating like a champ and gave it back and was funny and was witty. He's not a comic, but he worked. It fit perfectly with us. So we did that show for a while. Then Levy left, had his, Jerry Maguire moment. Who's coming with me? And we're like, none of us. We'll see you later, Bob. And then we didn't talk for like 12 years. Bob and I, we had a falling out.
Wow.
And then when I left the show, I'm like, one thing I always would have loved to do now that podcasts are available is the Miserable Men Show. And so I called Bob, we talked, we squashed the beef, we talked everything out. We both are different people now than we were then. And we learn from our mistakes. And the chemistry that I have with Bob, I don't have with too many people, and I love working with him. He always makes me laugh. So it was a no-brainer. And, the other guys are almost homeless, so they were available. So I'm kidding. Mike was almost homeless. But now we're back. We're on Patreon only, but we're going to be, I think by the end of January, I think we're going to be back to iTunes and Spotify and all that. I was with a company early on, and they at first said they wanted to get behind the Miserable Men Show. And then they heard a couple episodes. They were like, yeah, we might have a hard time finding sponsors for that. So now that I have sponsors, I think it's something we can definitely start doing again. But if you're interested, Patreon / The Miserable Men Show. All the episodes are up there. And there's a YouTube page, The Miserable Men Show, that has some episodes on there. Check it out. Watch it. It's fun. We do 2 hours once a week. And in the new year, we're going to be doing bonus shows and stuff. A lot more stuff on there. So, jump on the Patreon.
So I need to ask about one bit. I asked Bob about this when that whole incident happened with the plugs on with Bob, and because I think he was talking to you when Howard played that bit on the air. So what was your side of that situation? I'm just curious when he started screaming and going after how he wasn't getting the plugs. I'm just curious what your side was.
Look, could the message been delivered a better way? Absolutely. Was he wrong for being upset about that? I don't look, nobody there gets paid to do the show. One of the ways you get paid to do that show is promotion. It's the reason why people who have books and movies and everything that come on that show. It's not because of the fucking gift basket.
Right.
It's because of the amount of people listening. So to not get what you need as listen, when I started in stand-up, our promotion was go put flyers on car windshields, right?
Right.
And let me tell you, in case you're wondering, spoiler alert, that sucked.
Right.
And the breakdown of it sucked. Even it was like 1,000 flyers. You might sell 10 tickets, maybe. You know how long it takes to put 1,000 pieces of paper in a parking lot on cars? Like, that's your whole day, and you sell 10 tickets, right? And it's like, so this was our flyers system, and for Bob, he wasn't a staff. It's not like it was my plugs, even though I was part of it. It's Bob's. Bob does the Roastmaster stuff. Bob calls in, contributes. Bob does. He's not asking for money.
Right.
Throw the guy a fucking bone. Have Fred read the thing at the end. Have Bob read it at the end. It'll be hilarious. We did a show in Wisconsin. I still have the outtakes of him trying to name the city in Wisconsin. Washahaka, Washakuka, Washa Cuckoo Cuckoo. He sounds like Sinatra when he had Alzheimer's. But yeah, he's a passionate man, especially back then. Bob was fucked up on pills and drinking a lot more than he
I think
does
he's
now.
hilarious. I think
he's brilliant.
Yes.
Even in our falling out, I never once badmouthed the guy stand-up wise, because that I'd be a liar. I'd be a liar if I said the guy's not a good stand-up. He's one of the fucking best, man. He takes that room and just fucking grabs it by the throat, and it's a beautiful thing to watch every time. So yeah, I see both sides of the argument. Like, things were changing there, and Bob was dealing with a lot in his life, and we all have our spots, man.
No, it makes total sense. And actually, since you brought up the doing comedy and 1,000 flyers, and what about the Killers of Comedy and Ronnie's Block Party? Because I find those very unique. Were those two different shows, or were they part of the same package? How did that work?
Now, the Killers of Comedy tour was already kind of happening when I arrived to Sirius. It was Levy, Sal, Richard, Yucko, Florentine occasionally. And then I arrived there, and Bob knew that I was doing stand-up, so Bob right away plugged me in as the host. Because other than the headliner and that show, the only other person doing a lot of time is the host. And so I was fine. I was probably at a host level at that point in my stand-up career, so it worked out perfectly. I did a bunch of voices from the show, so I would just come out and do, familiar bits from the show, get people in the mood, whatever. But it ended up, I think we toured for like 2-3 years, maybe, like all over the place. It was a long tour. It was a great time. I roomed with Beetlejuice most of the time. And we would, much like a tornado, we would pick things up along the way too, like the Iron Sheik and various, Wack Packers would show up at different events, at different shows. So that was like a traveling, Animal House, that show. It was insanity. Like, it was the closest to being in Motley Crue I will ever come.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the Block Party was like a goof. Like, the Block Party, so Scott the engineer, Ronnie Mund, and myself were in Scott's studio one morning, and he was bitching about money, and the Killers of Comedy tour had stopped happening. So I said, as a joke, kind of, I'm like, we should do a show where you guys host it. I'll do stand-up, and I'll get another stand-up comic or something, and we'll do it. And Scott immediately is like, I'm in, and Ronnie's in, and we came up with the Block Party, and we booked 4 shows, and each one got worse and worse. The first show was bad turnout, and it was chaotic, and the second show was a shittier turnout and less chaotic, and then the third show was just sad. So I told the guys at the end of the night, listen, this fourth show in Long Island, this is our last one. I said, we're because I wasn't making any money. I gave them all the money because I was like, it's nothing, so I'd rather you guys split nothing than I take something from nothing. I felt terrible. And then that last show was in Long Island at the Brokerage. And I was on stage. We sold a lot of tickets. There was a lot of people that came to that show. It was sold out. And as I'm on stage closing up the show, Scott the engineer interrupts me from the DJ booth and says, Sal just threw up all over the bar.
I love that bit. I've seen that video.
Yeah, and the bar is behind everybody, so everybody stops looking at me, and they all just turn around, and I just go, well, thanks, Scott. I go, thanks, good night, everybody. I can't compete with a guy vomiting on a bar, and Scott just literally put a stick in my wheel and just stopped me cold. So that was it for me. I'm like, this is the last show we're ever doing. I don't really give a shit. And that Monday morning, Howard brought us in. He had video of Sal throwing up. We talked about the show. We goofed on Ronnie. We goofed on Scott. We goofed on me. And by the time I get out of the studio, the promoter calls me. He goes, I got 10 other places that want to book the Block Party. And from that point on, we were pretty much sold out everywhere we went for a year.
So was the phone bit with Scott where he said he was playing stuff off the phone, was that more played out than it actually was, or was he actually using a phone?
No, he actually was using a phone. And, the first time he ever did it was, I believe, he was Allentown, PA. And he says, so Ronnie and I are backstage. I'll never forget this. We're backstage, and Scott comes up to us, and in all seriousness, he goes, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to start playing Get the Party Started by the Black Eyed Peas.
I love that.
And I'm going to come in dancing through the crowd, like running through the crowd. And with a straight face, I look at him and I go, "That's fantastic, dude. You have to do that. That's fucking great." And Ronnie's just staring straight ahead at his food, he's not making any eye contact. And he walks off and Ronnie goes, "Is this fucking jerk off really going to do this?" I said, "I hope so, Ronnie. I really do." And I'll never forget, somebody was supposed to hit play on his phone and it wasn't working, or his phone screen shut off. So he had to come out, do his password, and then set it up again, and then go back as if he hadn't been out in front of the crowd yet, and waited for the person to hit play. And next thing, let's get the party started in here. Oh wait, let's get the party started in here. And then you just see Scott. All right, and everybody's just like, "What the fuck?" Nobody's joining him. Nobody's like, "Oh, the show's." Everybody's just confused, and he's going up to silence other than the song. And he stops the song, and Ronnie and I are tears. We are dying laughing in the back. He's out of breath for the next 20 seconds. Then Ronnie comes up, and I'm watching Scott, and I'm going, if his phone's hooked up, what do you think? What would happen if I call his phone?
I love this one too.
Yeah. And I just, out of the blue, I just walked to the back, and I dialed his number, and his phone rings on my phone, and then I hear it through the PA system. Ringing through the sound system. And then he does something I'll never forget. He answers it. He goes, "Hello?" And I go, "Why do you have your ringer on? Why are you answering it?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Shuli." I just hung up. I'm like, "What the fuck are you doing?" So, yeah, it was a legit bit. And that happened a couple times where he had to go out into the crowd and fix something with the phone and then hit the intro music for himself, which was, I mean, really. But again, it was a tour that I will never forget. Got to play the joint at the Hard Rock. Got to bring my mom on stage. Watching my mom get stopped in the casino and people asking to take pictures with her. It was phenomenal. So yeah, man, I'm very happy for that.
I have to ask about one more classic thing: the horn in the truck when Ronnie was sleeping.
Oh yeah, well we did the classic bit where you slam on the brakes and pretend you're gonna die.
Yes,
that's how you wake someone up. So Ronnie was, and in hindsight, I could have exploded his heart and killed him doing this. It probably wasn't the smartest move, but it led to maybe the greatest picture of all time. And there's video of it somewhere. I wish I could get a hold of it, but
I think it's on YouTube actually.
is it really? If you find it, send it to me, because I haven't seen the video in years, maybe ever.
It's hilarious. You're counting it down, and then you scream, and
yeah. And I just remember how, I mean, they were not, because listen, you're on the road now doing stand-up. So one of the things we do is fuck with each other. We love doing pranks on each other. And they never liked that. They never liked that part of the tour. But I did. I loved it, man. I set up Ronnie in a handicap room once, and he was livid. Everything's fucking low to the ground. I go, "Oh, you mean it's your size? Perfect." I put Scott in a fucking handicap room once that had a doorbell that, in case you were deaf, had a strobe light that would flash in the room like Studio 54. And then if you were blind, it had a loud ass fucking doorbell chime. And I remember walking to my room at like 2:30 in the morning, hammered, and just walking by his door and just hitting the button 3 times and then going to my room. Not even seeing the payoff in it, just knowing that it woke him up. And I'm fine with that.
That's great. So you talk about being with Beat on the tour, and you talk about, let's talk about the Wack Pack, because I find that very interesting with you, especially towards the end. You were pretty much, were you in charge of the group of Wack Packers, or were you doing content with them? How did that come to be, working with the Wack Pack?
I mean, for over a decade, the Wack Pack was my beat, right? Like that was my crew. I handled them all myself. I reached out to everyone. I kept tabs on everything, of course, with the help of Marianne. She's the den mother there, and she helped out a ton, sending me information on this one and that one. And I would say the last, I don't know, 3 years or 5 years, somewhere between 3 to 5 years, the Wack Pack got taken away from me. A group was formed. Someone else was put in charge of it. And the Wack Packers were kind of divvied out to other writers to keep tabs on and get content from. And for me, that was like one of the first things for me where I was just like, okay. Because, like, I'm not saying I wanted to head up the group because, whatever. I was doing that myself before it was a fucking group. But it would have been nice to have been in the mix and in the process, considering that, these are my babies in another sense of the word, right? So that kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Not to mention, being questioned by people in the group now as to, well, can you find this out about? And it's like, dude, I know what you need and I can get it. Just let me do my thing. And that goes back to, again, I mentioned the spontaneity, right? The organic nature of comedy, especially radio, his show. And it just got so bogged down in format and everything, is there's nothing there's nothing organic happening. Nothing. And it was fucking boring for me, man. It got stale and it was just it wasn't excited. Listen, I know there's a lot of people out there who would have shut the fuck up and collected that paycheck and the health insurance and all that, or rode that thing out for another 5 years. I'm not one of those guys, man. I need peace of mind. I need to be happy on the inside, and the rest of the shit I'll figure out. Because if I could go to New York City with zero radio experience for a 1 week audition and last 15 years at the greatest show in radio ever, the New York Yankees of radio, then I'll figure it out. I'll get a gig in Huntsville. You know what I mean? Like, I ain't worried about it, man. If I gotta fucking go, rent cars for Enterprise the rest of my life, fine. I have enough memories and great times, and my life I've been playing with house money for many years now, so I'm fine with whatever comes my way. I'm just happy that I'm at peace finally. My family is. We're all happy. We're all living life. I wish the best to everybody out there. At my former, I'm friends with so many people there. Keep in contact with them. That's family. I love them. Management's a different story, but whatever. What are you gonna do?
What I try to tell people is, with some of the people I've talked to from the show, I don't like to do what some of the other shows and Howard BS platforms there are out there that try to look to get people to say,
Yeah.
"F you." I'm not looking.
Sure.
I'm just looking to
They
understand.
want everybody to be stuttering John, right? And it's
God. Well,
and it's
actually,
like I'm not bitter like that,
right.
I'm not. Everything I have right now in my life that I care about is from that show. Is because of that show, and that's my family. So yeah, go ahead.
And it's interesting you brought that up, because when I was talking to Bob last week, I said that Stuttering John kind of made news because he said he would go back to the show if he had the ability to go back to the show. Now,
Well, of course, if I had the ability to fly, I'd fucking be Neo from the Matrix. Like, what are you talking about? Of course you would.
would that even be a thought in your head if that ever was presented back to you, or no?
For me to come back?
Yeah, because he said he would go back in a snap if it was offered to him.
Yeah, I listen. I don't know if I would go back in a snap.
Okay, yeah.
My thing towards the end was I just wanted to be on air. I wanted to do bits. I wanted to be. I didn't want to be bogged down in all these fucking meetings. I didn't want these people who I have more experience than and no more than telling me what to do. Like that for me was like, this is a fucking waste of time. I could run circles around you doing this gig. And now you're going to take this fucking role with me like you're my boss. You're not my boss. But the problem is they are your boss now in that corporate structure. And it's like, and I went from having my dream job to being in a factory line, right? And it's just like, I don't know, man. Some people are cut out to work in a factory, and some people aren't. And I am not.
I
I'm
give you
out.
credit. I give you credit because you walked away because you were looking at peace of mind as opposed to just accepting a paycheck. I know that's like you said, that's a hard thing to walk away from. And I know, like, I've heard you talk about it a million times. I'm not going to bring it up. Like you talked about the NDAs. I'm not going to talk
Yeah.
about that because that's just a load of BS that people talk about. But
Yeah, I have no NDA. I signed nothing.
That's what I mean.
Left. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And I could talk about everything, from every meeting. I could talk about people. But where does that leave me? Right? Who am I at the end of that? Is I'm this guy that nobody's gonna fucking hire because I'm sitting here spilling the beans about everything. And plus, if I have zero to offer talent wise or ability, then that's probably what I would do. It was important to me to leave on good terms, that place, and so that's why, we had a conversation when I left, him and I assured him that I'm not going to be out there shitting on you. But, for me to go back, I don't necessarily think that show is, there's no coming back. There's no good way to leave, and there's no coming back. And I knew that when I left, and I was okay with that.
No, that makes sense. And one of the things I left out from before, how did you get involved with the news team? That's one.
I love that. By the way, I love the breaking news. This just in: John said he would return to the Stern Show. It's like, get the fuck out! Really? That's insane. Wow. Shuli said he would dunk a basketball if he could. This just in. So what was your next? I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. How did you get involved with the news team?
The news team was what I was brought there for. So they have this. Howard has this brilliant idea to form a news team that covers the world of Howard Stern, the staff, the guests, the Wack Pack, you name it. And they start bringing in real deal reporters. He wanted to sound like an AM news show. Like the most famous one is 1010 Wins out in New York. So he wants that sound for the Howard 100 News, and he hires reporters like Steve Langford. He hires lead anchor Ralph Howard, who was just retired from that station from 1010 Wins, was the anchor for 1010 Wins for years. Everyone in New York knows his voice. Penny Crone, different reporters, different, Emmy Award winning. And then I guess they realized that, nobody there, while they're all great reporters, nobody there knew the show. Nobody there was a super fan. So I, for years had called in with different games based on the past of the show. As I would listen to a lot of best ofs, I would record fights. So I would create games from fights. And I knew a lot of the history of the show, even though I didn't grow up on the East Coast and hear it from its inception. I caught up. I was a super fan, right? And so they call me up and they're like, we need you to fly to New York. We can't tell you what it's for over the phone. And the whole time I'm like, this is Sal. I'm like, I'm going to fucking kill him. When I get to New York, I'm going to kill him. But at that time I was broke. I was doing stand up. I was broke. I was living with my folks. I asked my dad to buy me a plane ticket to New York for the next day. He did. I show up the next day. By the way, till this day, he doesn't let me. He knows the exact amount to this day. That's what a Jew my dad is. $948. Still till this day. So I show up and they bring me into this boardroom. And it's like 18 people in there, right? And editors, producers, reporters. The whole 100 News team. News director, this woman, Liz Aiello. I love Liz. She was awesome. She helped me a ton over there. And they go, we want you to hear something. And you got to understand, I'm getting off a plane at JFK. I'm showing, I got 3 joints in my cigarette pack. Like, I am the most non-professional. And I'm in this boardroom. And they're like, we'd love your opinion on this. I'm like, okay, you know. And they play me a news brief. And the news brief, you know, one of the reporters is like, Wack Packer Artie Lang is in hot water. And I'm like, all right, stop it. And I stop it. And I'm like, so my first day was I put together like a mafia, you know, crime task force board with like Howard, Robin, you know, Gary, you know, Fred, Benji, Beetlejuice, boom, boom, boom. And I'm schooling all of them on who everybody is, kind of like a, you know, 2-minute drill rundown of their career on the show or appearances, whatever. And that was that was my first day. And then by day 2, I'm like, shit, I shot my wad. Like, I told them everything. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm going to sneak this recorder out and I'm going to go into Times Square and I'm going to ask people about Howard. And then I'm just going to do crowd work. I'm just going to goof on them. And I did that. And I brought it back to the news director, Liz Aiello. And she listened to it. And within 15 seconds, she goes, we're putting this on the air. This is fantastic. So I was like, all right, I see a crack in the door. So now it's time to learn Adobe Audition. It's time to learn how to interview people because I want to be in charge of my editing and I want to know what I'm doing wrong as far as interviewing. And that's when I went to guys like Langford, Ralph Howard, John Lieberman, Lisa G. This was the core. Long story short, it went from a 1-week audition, 18-person staff, to, you know, 3-4 years later. I mean, I ended up getting a full-time gig, becoming one of the reporters, and it ended up it was just 3 reporters, and I was one of the 3. Mr. 3 joints in his cigarette pack made the cut.
So who do you think was more unique, though, Lisa or Lieberman? Because I found those two to be very unique in a lot of ways.
I mean, they're both extremely unique in their own ways, right? Like, Lisa is something else. She is Angela from The Office. She really is. Like, but she also doesn't take no shit either. So I love that about Lisa. And then Lieberman's just a fucking maniac. Like, you're just like, how are you not in the news, much less, you know, reporting it? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, his party, getting drunk at the parties was probably the funniest audio and video clips of that show.
And then you have Steve Langford, who was unbelievable. He was another unbelievable human being that, I mean, you want to talk about a commitment to news? Let me tell you this story. Artie's playing Carnegie Hall, right? Steve and I go to cover his sound check, okay? And Artie's on stage. Carnegie Hall's empty. And Artie's on stage telling this story, and Steve's got his recorder out, and he's recording him. And Artie's telling a story that the last time he was at Carnegie Hall, he had bought tickets to see Richard Lewis. And he's telling this great story. And all of a sudden, this woman walks up and interrupts the interview, and she goes, "Excuse me, we don't allow recording on stage."
Yep.
And he goes, "Oh, okay." And then she says, "Can you come with me to Steve Langford?" And Steve Langford looks at her and he goes, and he's 100% serious. He goes, "Where are you taking me? Abu Ghraib?" And
great.
Artie and I both look at each other, and the woman goes, "Is he with you?" And Artie goes, "I've never seen this man in my life." Right? So Steve walks off with this woman. He comes back a few minutes later. I walk over to him. I go, "What happened?" He goes, "She told me to delete the file." And I go, "Did you do it?" And I'll never forget. He looks at me and he goes, "You could put a gun to my head and I'll never delete anything." And I'm just like, it's a story about Richard Lewis, man. This ain't the hill you want to die on, dude. Like, it's not like he told you who killed Kennedy. I mean, what the fuck? What are we talking about?
But I have one more thing, and actually
Yeah.
it has to do with one of the bits on the show, which actually I can relate to partially because the motor mouth bit, if you remember that when it was on the air, that Richard and Sal called into a college radio station for a car show.
Is that where they sped up their voice or something?
They basically called in and they kept just saying inappropriate things on the air.
Oh.
And by the way, that was my college radio station that I was at.
Oh, that's funny.
And when I heard that bit on the air, I found it on YouTube. I said, wait a minute, I know those guys because I used to see them every week when I used to go to Nassau Community College.
Sal and Richard are, I hope one day they get the credit they deserve for the prank call mastery that those guys have created. Chinese Confusion is one of the greatest prank calls of all time.
Yes.
And then Richard, my favorite call of Richard's. And it's tough to pick one favorite, but if there's one that makes me laugh every single time, it's the one where this old woman had 3 different items for sale, and
Yes.
Richard recorded his voice 3 different times. And so when he called her, he would hit drops of himself talking, and he would say 3 different things at one time. And this woman was so confused and so baffled. A guy's calling in to buy, I'm calling about your fur coat, hockey net, basketball hoop, like all at the same time. The woman's like, something's wrong with your phone. Brilliant. Just brilliant.
But I love you being on the show. I love them. You guys were all a team. That's what made the show great back in the day.
Absolutely.
And I just felt like now, like you said, and I'm not trying to trash the show in any way because shows change over the years.
Yeah.
But it just seems, and I said this, and Bob said this too, that it's just a completely different show than it once was. It's just that's all it is,
man. It's all it is, dude. Shit happens, and things change, and I go back to where I used to live in LA, and I look around and I'm like, fuck, this is all different now. And that is life, and things become different. People grow up, people evolve, people do whatever it is they're entitled to do. Howard's entitled to have whatever kind of show he wants. He earns that right. He earned the right to work 3 days a week. Hell, 1 day a week. All these people bitching would still listen every day for a 1 day a week show, because
that's what's funny. Haters tune in all the time still.
Well, as Artie once said, even the worst Stern show is still a great Stern show. Or no, that was Blowjobs. Never mind. Anyways, either way, I'm grateful for everything that I got to learn, experience, and live through being a part of that show and that family. They're always going to be family. I have no ill will towards Howard or Robin or Fred or Gary or any of the staff there. I love them all. They all pretty much reached out when my mom passed. So, we're still tight, and I love those guys. I wish them nothing but the best, man. I hope they crush these next few years. And, I told them, if you ever need a tan mom, jump on. You know me. I'm available. I told Howard. Hit me up, dog.
That fit is great. That voice is amazing.
Thank you. I'm working on an animated series about the life of Tan Mom. That is true, by the way.
I mean, how did I'm sorry, I'm keeping you a lot longer than.
It's all right, buddy. I'm good.
But how did you come up with doing that, or was that just her being there all the time?
That's how I came up with all the voices. It's just talking to them over and over and over again. Like I said, this was my beat for over a decade. There was nobody I could turn to and go, hey, call high pitch for me and find it. No, I would, hello, and so I would end up doing high pitch to high pitch. I mean, some of my longest calls are with Sour Shoes, because he would do voices and I would do voices, and we would just get lost. And we end up not talking as ourselves for a half hour, 40 minutes. I talked to Lafred the Elephant Boy, and he's talking back to me as this one. So I've always been a huge fan of the Wack Pack. Back before I worked there, the Wack Pack and the back office were my 2 favorite things. Once I started working there, I loved when comics would come on. I loved Howard's interviewing, because I love hearing comics tell stories. So those are some of my favorite memories of that place, man. I have tons of them.
No, it's crazy, and it's hard to last for a show for 15 years, whether it's TV, radio, podcasting. Tough gig. I mean, so 15 years is an unbelievable feat.
Yeah, man, I was proud of it. You know, I had like I said, I had zero experience. Everything I learned was because of guys like Jay Thomas and Scott Ferrall, and of course, you know, Howard bringing me into the building to begin with. But you know, there were many nights where I got a hotel room next door at the Radio City Apartments, which was like, you know, looked like the building from New Jack City where they fucking made drugs out of. And I would get a room. I'd start my shift in the morning, do the news, stay for the afternoon. Usually there'd be like a superfan roundtable or something, and then Scott Ferrall. And I would stay for Scott Ferrall. I would do Jay in the afternoons, and I would pay to sit there and learn and be able to kind of gain experience by them fucking up and letting me in the door. You know, that's what I told Tim. I said, "You fucked up hiring me, dude. You really did. I'm gonna soak all this shit in." So
Now, Tim had a tough job running those channels, though, too, just from everything. I mean, unfortunately, he was out the door for other reasons, but
right.
he had a tough job running those channels when they came to be.
Yeah, and he did a great job, man. He, you know, those are people's favorite years of Sirius, or the Sabian years, and I can't argue that. I mean, he, you know, and what's funny about Tim is there was nothing in the middle. People either loved Tim or they fucking hated Tim. And me, I never hated Tim, not even for a second. He gave me a shot nobody would give anybody with my credentials. He believed in me. He saw that I could be a utility guy. You know, I was the first host of the Superfan Roundtable. I was, you know, doing the Dr. Harry Fisch show when Scott Ferrall was out. Miserable Men stepped in. Like, I was everywhere, and he was okaying all of it because he knew I could do it. And so, you know, if it wasn't for him, man, I wouldn't have gained anywhere near the experience that I would have. And he was the one that said, you know, the news is winding down. We're going to be getting rid of the news. I recommended you to be a writer and producer for the show. And I was like, awesome. You know, so Tim was instrumental in my success over there. I love that dude.
So, Shuli, I appreciate the conversation. Before we go, just if you want to plug your shows, just so people know them again, because I appreciate all the time you gave me. So I want to make sure.
Oh, no problem. When is this coming out, by the way?
Friday.
Okay, so Saturday, January 8th, I'm going to be at Side Splitters in Tampa, 10:30 p.m. show. Tan Mom on paper is supposed to come out. I can't guarantee anything. I can guarantee that during the day around noon, I will be at Side Splitters with my newest sponsor to the Shuli Show, Rustic Cuts, a beef company out of Iowa. And they're bringing burgers and steaks, and we're doing a barbecue meet and greet where you can just come and hang out. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to charge, pay for tickets or anything.
Sounds familiar.
What do you mean? Oh, block party?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So come down, hang out with me. Brent's coming down. Iso, my producer from the Shuli Show, will be there. Owen, one of my shoes team members on my show. I have my own Wack pack now that I talk to. They're called the Shoes Team, and they report on shoes around the world. And so Owen is going to be there. Weed smoking kid with cerebral palsy, good friend of mine, good kid. And yeah, Shalom Shuli on Instagram and Twitter. Wake Up White People on Getter. That's my screen name on there. That's a little joke, guys. The joke. Hold on. The joke bombed, honey. I told you. Don't write that shit. Sorry. The Shuli Show on Patreon. See, that's organic. That's funny, right?
I love it. Yes.
I didn't. Why is there an echo? I don't know. Honey, I'm in the cave doing a show. Shut the fuck up. So, the Shuli Show, Patreons is the best way to support us. The Shuli Show on all platforms, YouTube, The Miserable Men Show, also on Patreon. You can hear it live and participate in the show live if you sign up there, and also on YouTube. And I'm on Twitch playing video games, grown man, cursing at children.
I love that. I've watched that too. So yes.
Yeah. So Shalom Shuli TV on Twitch. And I think that's everything. Yeah. ShalomShuli.com is my website. Keep track of where I'm doing Lafayette, Louisiana at the end of January. I'm doing Mobile, Alabama. Well, that's one of those gigs where you're going to leave the car running, if you know what I mean. And then I'm going to be in March. I'll be where am I? Rochester, Comedy at the Carlson. So I'll be in a lot of places. Come check it out. Come listen. Come support. Thank you, Nick. Love you guys.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk again sometime. So
yeah, man. Anytime. Be well. Okay. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
All
right. We're back after that amazing hour-long interview with Shuli Egar, comedian, formerly of the Howard Stern Show, now doing his own podcast, The Shuli Show. Also, and you'll love this, Nick, he's doing a show that he did on one of the Howard channels, called Miserable Man.
And again, he seemed like a really funny guy. So I mean, yeah, all the power to him. And really, thanks. Thanks to him for dealing with our shenanigans.
And like I told Nick before the interview aired, it's hard to get me to laugh. It's hard to get me to laugh.
It's hard to get you to laugh, to sustain it.
Yeah, Shuli had me laughing for a full hour, and that's hard. Yeah. Like I almost I was like bending over in like that laughter you get when you like are laughing out loud hysterically. Yep. Like I was belly laughing almost.
Yep.
So he's really good. Check out his podcast. Check out Miserable Men. It's on Patreon. He's doing a bunch of other things. He's doing stand-up. He's all over the country. And yeah, so check him out. But anyway, we've made it to the end of this episode 12 of Beyond the Bench. It's unreal, right? That we're in 2022, right?
Yep. But you know what? We're here. We'll continue to be here, and we're going to be podcasting our way through it. So just stick with us, and we'll try to make things not awful as we can, right?
Yeah, and also Empty the Bench, which
Empty the Bench has come back for our first episode in 2022. So that's gonna be on January 8th at 3 p.m. I'll be there, and Nick will be there. We'll be talking about all the sports headlines, everything we didn't get into with the Ken Rosenthal thing. We'll be breaking down some football. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of things. So
we'll be talking about Antonio Brown as well.
We're going to talk about Antonio Brown too. But yeah, make sure you tune in for that. Okay?
Yes. So make sure you stay with us. Make sure you follow this show as well. I'll go through it again. Follow Beyond the Bench on Twitter at Beyond the Bench 1. Follow it on Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Bench 1. Follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network. Follow Nick at Nick Writes Words. Follow me at N Morgasen Radio. And if you want to follow Empty the Bench, our sports show as well, at ETB Sports as well. So for Nick Fodera, I'm Nick Morgasen. Happy New Year 2022. We're looking forward to another great year, and we'll see you next week, everybody.
Good night, everybody. See you back on the bench.